Thanks everyone for showing up. We just put together a little webinar here for the North American Championship that's being held in Vancouver, May 29th to June 3rd. We've got four of us here tonight. We've got Ross MacDonald, Eric Doyle, myself, Drew Mitchell, and Alex Lebowski. We're all going to do a little bit different slides during this presentation, and we're going to walk through the agenda here pretty quickly. First, Alex is going to start with the feeder event, which is our English-based Star Centennial Regatta, which is May 27th and 28th. Then we're just going to go through the dates for the Star North Americans. Ross is going to touch base on local conditions. Eric, the sale expert, is going to go through our sales selection for the event and some sale designs. And then at the end, I'm just going to touch base about how you can get your sales serviced if you do need that when you are in Vancouver. And then we'll end up with a quick question and answer period. Alex, do you want to start off here?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexander. I'm part of North Sales Vancouver, and today I'm going to do overview of the dates and events. I'm going to start with English-based Star Centennial Regatta. It was going to be hosted on May 27-28 by Kitsilano Yacht Club. There is a great picture of the yacht club by the water. Great opportunity to check out the waters, meet some local sailors, and I'm pretty sure on May 27th the club is hosting barbecue, so great opportunity to come check out the club and meet local sailors. And here we have a date for the Star North Americans on Monday 29th and Tuesday May 30th is going to be check-in, measurement and weigh-in, and going to be follow up with the practice race on Tuesday and opening ceremony and briefing before racing. And then on Wednesday, there is the first day of racing, and it's going to go all the way through the week till Saturday, June 3rd. That's pretty much everything on my part here.
All right, thanks, Alex. Now we're going to move over to Ross and just chat about local conditions.
Okay, so you know, for those of you that haven't made the trip to Vancouver, you know, it's a very tidal place, a lot of current most of the time, and so we'll just touch mainly on that, and then towards the end we'll just talk a bit about what you can expect wind-wise, and which will hopefully help Eric out. So the first slide here is just the current direction. That's obviously English Bay there. The two yellow circles are the two clubs. The one in the middle of the screen is the Kits Yacht Club, which Alex just showed from another angle. And then to the top left is Royal Vancouver Yacht Club. So the biggest defining features in the area are obviously a lot of tide rise and is, you know, being so many rivers and snow runoff, there's a lot of river water. And this picture, you know, it's not the best clarity, but you can kind of see in the top left that there's quite a bit of silt in the water, and that's generally coming from the Fraser River, which is just around the corner to the left. And you know, it's about 1,000-mile long river, which dumps a lot of stuff in there. So sometimes the tide lines are color-coded, which makes it easy. You can kind of see what's coming, which is kind of tactically nice. But it can be a little tricky because sometimes it can change on one side of the course versus the other. And so just knowing when to do that. The red arrows, excuse me, are the current direction. And so in this case, it's an ebb tide, and ebb means it's going down. And so on the far right, and maybe just go back one slide there, Alex. So on the far right is Vancouver Harbor, which we can't see in this photo here, but it basically is a big fjord about 16 miles in length and very deep. And so a lot of water drains out the right-hand side along that top red arrow there. So that's the fastest moving water. And, you know, our race course most likely will be to the left of there, a little closer to the yacht clubs. And we won't have to deal with that. But if the extension of the course, a ley line or something like that is getting closer to that faster moving water, that could be either really beneficial or make your day a lot longer than you hoped it would be. So as you go outside the bay, that current basically is going south when it's ebbing. When the tide's going down, it's going south towards Seattle and Victoria. So it's draining around the bottom end of Vancouver Island, and then rinse and repeat. It happens again and goes back up and comes back from the south. So we'll go to the next slide, please, Alex. Now we're looking at a flood. It's just the same thing in reverse. You can see there, I've hashed over in this sort of orangey yellow, which is just sort of above where the RVYC is there. That's a sort of feature we call Spanish Banks. And at low tide, it actually comes out of the water, and it's almost a mile walking from the shoreline out to the end of it. But at high tide, you know, it's totally in the water. So as it is in this photo, I've just colored it. So what that does is when it's flooding, depending on how high or how low the water is, it can sort of change the direction of the current and can create a bit of a back eddy in towards where RVYC is in the middle left. And so that the actual change to a flood along this sort of south or left side coast kind of may happen a little bit later than you would normally think. And as the tide goes down the bay, it sort of does two things. It either goes pushing into this feature in the very bottom of your screen, which is a place called False Creek. It's not a very big fjord, but that's just where the faster water tries to go to. And then whatever doesn't go into False Creek gets pushed around the top of Stanley Park, which is this forested area here, and into that longer, deeper fjord. And so that, again, that's a faster moving water. So in general, just to sum it up, the slower moving water is obviously closer to the shore, as you'd expect. And if the race committee puts the bottom end of the race course closer to Stanley Park, there is a bit of a cone effect with the current there. So probably not much current at the bottom end or the top end, depending on the wind direction of the race course. But where if the marks are close to Stanley Park in sort of that left-hand side of the forested area there, then there's probably not going to be too much current there. But as soon as you get away from that and further to the west or down to the left in this picture, then you're going to experience more current. Either it's flooding or ebbing. So next one. So here's some of the currents we're going to see both at the Centennial Regatta on the Saturday and Sunday before, and then through that week. Obviously, we were racing Wednesday through Saturday. The good news in this graph, I've just sort of shaded the areas that are the race time so you can see. But as you can see, it's there's two things. A lot of the times it's ambiguous, the current, and or even it's ebbing. And there's not much, it's in feet on the far right, pardon me. There's not much, you know, tide going up and down. So the actual amount of current relative to what we can see in English Bay is pretty minimal until we get later in the week, sort of Friday and Saturday, and where it's going to be flooding almost the whole race time, and it's going to be quite the gain in water coming in. So we could expect stronger floods in the last 2 days of the North Americans. Okay, here's the wind. Predominantly that time of the year, you'll probably see a west wind. And, you know, we're still, even though it's in the end of May, we could get anything we tend to call January in Vancouver. So we normally get a really, really nice May, and then sort of middle of June, it can be sort of rainy again. And then we never see the clouds again come July 1st. So depending on the timing of that, I could be totally wrong, but I would expect we'd see most of our race days in the west wind. And this is how it presents itself coming into English Bay with the geography and things. So there's two types of westerly. There's a thermal westerly where, you wait around and have a few coffees in the morning and you wait for it to fill in. And like most bays, it sort of fills from the lowest side or the bottom of the bay first and sort of starts sucking itself in. And I've hashed a line which goes from the right-hand side of the bay all the way over to the left-hand side of the bay, which we can't see in this photo. It's just off the screen. But that basically is sort of how the thermal builds. It builds from about there into the bay. So there'll be some days where there'll be no wind beyond that line or in the top of the screen. And yet in the bay that we could see, maybe even 8-9 knots in some parts of the bay, and a pretty good sailing condition. Will never be strong, but enough to get some good races in. And the second westerly is sort of all the same, but there is, more gradient and there's a push behind it. And the top arrow is sort of the predominant wind direction, which is the northwest. And then when it gets into the bay, it does a bit of a bend as it turns into the bay, and which is the next arrow from the top, and it's sort of presents itself as a westerly at the top of the bay. And then as soon as you get into the bay at the top left of the race course, it can be a little bit left of west, and which is the third arrow down on the left side. And then is generally, without going through every arrow, but what it does is it presents itself as more of a northwesterly down at the bottom of the bay or closer to the shore, and a little bit offshore. When I say offshore, a mile and a half offshore, it's a little bit more western direction. So, you guys can read between the lines, but it's generally in those conditions always a left-hand track. There's a few exceptions. The ebb current is one of them, and also just how much bend to the left at the top of the race course means you can definitely go too far on starboard and tack too late, and thinking that you're not laying the weather mark, and after a minute or two you realize you've overstood and you've just sailed too much extra distance. So that's basically how the westerly works. Pressure wise, in general, there's a little bit more pressure on the left side, and depending on the day, and again, current is definitely, probably, half a knot to 3/4 of a knot stronger, no matter if it's ebbing or flooding, further away from shore. So that's the west wind. And the next one, we'll just quickly go through what other possible breezes we could see. The two ones with the blue circles around it, the north and the east breeze, I've just circled those because those are sort of what I would call a transition breeze, meaning you might have it and you might be sailing in some nice breeze, but it's probably not going to last very long. It's gonna do something. It's either going to peter out or it's going to shift into a more common predominant wind direction. So those are the two breeze directions where you get your spider senses tingling, thinking that something's going to change. So starting from the top, the northerly, you'd see that in the morning when the westerly hasn't filled in, but it's kind of, maybe it was blowing from the east overnight, just a diurnal thing, and it's kind of spinning its way around. And by race time, as long as there's some heating and you see some of those cumulus clouds over the mountains, and clear everywhere else, it's probably going to turn into a westerly. And the northeasterly breeze is kind of the opposite. It's the rainy day, coldish, and it's blowing quite hard. Almost always pays to go left because it's just blowing stronger through that gap there, between the bridge and the park. And so that's a good breeze. It's a good sailing breeze. It's not the best day to go to the beach, but good conditions for racing. And then as the clouds start to break up or it stops raining and the front's sort of passing by, that northeasterly will generally shift around to the right. So it'll clock right. And again, it could kind of present itself as an easterly, which we talked about earlier, or it could just do a quick jump to a southeasterly, still be raceable, but on its way down in velocity. So, so that's a cautionary thing. If you're having a good day of racing in a northeasterly and the weather's getting better, and you just notice the average velocity is dropping, then you can expect that change to happen. And if it's going to be a quick change, there usually be a clearing to the south, sort of by, you know, above the yacht clubs or even further away, but you'll be able to see it through the clouds. And then just going over to the bottom there in the southeasterly, that's a common breeze direction as well. Again, it's being an offshore wind, it's shifty, and you can go either side. There's no real sides to play. It's just staying in the pressure, keeping an eye on any current, and that's about it, really. It's just sort of being heads up. And again, you know, if it starts to die out of the southeast, then it's probably again going to shift to the right. It's going to clock around and either try and die completely and fill in from the west, or it's going to go into its death throes in the south or the southwest. But that's just a hint that it's quickly on its way out. So that's the general trend with that. The south wind we get maybe at that time of year, I'd say once every 10 days, and it can be sort of 5 to 8 knots, or you could even have a day where it's 10 to 20 knots. And it's a very, very shifty wind. Usually it's clear, or not clear, but it's sort of broken cloud, I'd say. So, but not enough to bring in a westerly. And it's a passing of a front where the weather's gotten better, but it hasn't quite cleared out into a high pressure regime yet. Good wind to sail in, very, very tricky and shifty, but good fun. Everyone's got a chance in that one. The last one is a southwesterly, which again is a passing of a front, could be very, very strong. Strong meaning, you know, 10 to 16 knots, and very infrequent, but if it does show up, it's a good wind to race in as well. And generally those two last breezes, the south and the southwesterly, you're generally going to see more pressure the further out the bay you go. And in fact, if you go outside the bay, they're probably 5-6 knots stronger. So yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Ross. Now we're gonna pass it over to Eric for sail selection and designs.
Okay, so you know, like any other major regatta, we're allowed to measure in 2 full suits of sails, 2 mains and 2 jibs, and it just so happens we offer 2 models of sails. Yeah, we can leave that slide up right there, and we'll go into a little explanation. You know, kind of our AP sail would be the one on the bottom, the M26, and that's built out of a little bit heavier cloth. It's a 3/8 Dacron, you know, polycoat, we call it, quite a firm cloth in the body, and it's got some reinforcement in the radial head that's a little more warp oriented. And this is it's a, you know, 0 to 25 knot sail, or if you're just going to get one sail, you get this one. It's pretty durable, but it's versatile. We can power it up, we can depower it in the breeze, twist nicely, and it's probably a little better sail than our other one, the M06, once you get uprange. The M06 is a little bit lighter cloth in the body, the 366 PK, and this sail has a little bit rounder sections in the back. It's a little bit more of a sail geared for when we're trying to get the crew over the side, we're trying to power the boat up. You know, we all know when you get the starboat, and if you look around and everybody else has got the crew over the side and you're kind of sitting there and not really hiking or just trying to get up, that you got some problems, and you gotta power the boat up. You know, we want to get the crew over as quick as we can. Use that weight, use the riding moment, and go fast. And this sail is geared for that. It goes up, you know, just fine, 14, 15, 16 knots. It's plenty fast. Opens up nicely with the lighter cloth. You know, you're just putting some hard miles on it. You know, you're not going to get as many race days out of that sail if you push it up range as you do with the M26. So, you know, I'm going to go to that regatta. I'm going to have both of those sails in my box for sure. And if it's, you know, I imagine that the M06 is probably going to be the sail I use most of the time. But if there's, you know, one of those days the front comes through or something, and it's, you know, it's going to be over 10 knots all day, I'm looking at the forecast and it never says anything in the single digits, then I'm happy to put the M26 up and you know, save my M06 for the lighter days. So then we can probably move on to the jibs. We've got, you know, and we kind of want to think of the jibs in two categories, kind of flatter water and bumpier waters. The sail on the bottom, the J9, it's a little bit fuller sail. It's got a little bit more shape down low, especially forward, to give it a little wider groove. Helps the boat keeping accelerating all the time. It's also a little fuller in the head, so when you have to ease the sheet a little bit, bear off to get in those waves, there's still a little bit of shape in the sail, a little bit of drive. You know, if the sail's a little flatter, like our J115 full radial, then it's a little bit flatter in the head, which allows you to sheet it harder, help you point, which is nice in the flat water. It's a little tough downrange when, like I said, when you've got to ease the sail. So in other words, since it's a little flatter, when you start easing the jib, because that's the angle the boat needs to sail to get through the chop, the sail doesn't have quite as much power as the other one, which in a starboat isn't that big a deal if it's windy enough. You know, if it's blowing, you know, the boat's fully powered up and 8 knots of wind, and if I know it's going to be flat water and light, and I sailed in Vancouver once or twice and there was a lot of flat water, and, you know, for sure I'm going to have the sail in a bigger fleet. When you sail and it's going to be light, I think the J9 is pretty nice. You know, the water gets chopped up a little more all the time, especially when you turn the bottom mark and you go back upwind, you're going through the chop of all the other boats and things like that. You know, what I like about these two sails is they have a pretty good overlap. You know, you're not going to be, you know, the death of you and terribly slow, you know, if you get caught with a J115 downwind or the J9 up range in the wind. You know, we do offer another sail, a J2. That's a sail that's very similar to the J115, but it's just a tiny bit, it flies a tiny bit flatter because it's made of a very durable cloth, a much heavier. It's all 205 in the body, which the other sails only have in the foot panels to keep it from flopping. And I keep that sail in my box, you know, for those days when it's just really windy and you know, you're kind of wondering if they're going to send you out. This is a nice sail to have. You put that one up, goes very fast, and it kind of saves your other jibs for those days, because we know that when we're racing in the breeze, it's pretty hard on the jibs attacking the bottom mark and things like that. So, you know, you're only allowed 2 jibs. Odds are I'm not going to measure that one in. I like I said, I always have one in my box. It sits there and it only gets a couple days a year, probably, unless it's an unusual year. And maybe if you look at the forecast and there's going to be a front coming through and it's going to blow for 2 days really hard, then you'd consider measuring that one in. But other than that, I think it's tough to go wrong having either of those other 2 jibs in your box, and you'd be all set up for the regatta.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. Oh, there's maybe I'll just comment on this picture. This was us in Marblehead, and that's an M06 that we measured in, and the panel layout on the J115 full radial. I mean, the J9, you can see how it has the slide earlier with Alan going upwind was a 115 full radial. This is the J9. It has a true tack box and a clue box. You can see the forward part of the jib with the funky looking windows because of the radial panels there, where we've pushed a little more shape to make it a little wider angle and a little more forgiving. So it's a nice shot right there. Marblehead this year at the Worlds.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so
Yeah.
much, Eric. That was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you kind of covered your recommendations on kind of what sales you're gonna, you can use at the event. So I'm just gonna go into just our North Sales Certified Service. So when you guys do get to town, if you guys need anything, please reach out. We're just outside of Vancouver and Richmond, so just the city south of Vancouver. But we're gonna be around, so you can either contact myself or Alex, but you can always give the loft a phone call as well. We'll have guys on the go for the week that this event's going on. So just reach out with any needs you might have, and we'll make sure you're taken care of. Other than that, I think we're going to go into a question, maybe answer period. If you do have a question, if you could write it in the chat, and we'll try to take 2 or 3 if there are questions. Other than that, thanks a lot for everyone coming out. We look forward to seeing you guys here in Vancouver. I don't see any questions coming through the chat right now. I think you might be able to unmute yourself if you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question. We'll just wait a minute. Can anyone talk about these pictures here, Eric? Do you know? Oh, sorry, there is no unmuting right now. So you would have to just type in the box.
Well, I thought I'd throw that picture in on the left. You don't want to be that guy breaking the mast. And I put it on because that's actually me at the North Americans last year in Annapolis. We had a big windy day, and yeah, we had a race. Well, I'll just go ahead and say it. We went out for the first race, and the spreader broke, and we broke the mast, and we got a tow in, and we sailed back out, and we had a good race. The second race with I think we had a second, and then the third race it started blowing quite hard. It was blowing about 25 knots. We were winning the race, and the backstay broke about halfway up the mast, and rig went over the side, but it was so windy we were crossing the finish line right there with the mast down, and I think we still finished in like 18th out of 35 boats, but we weren't able to save that sail. And you can see the jib's kind of gone. It was kind of rig punched through the jib, and I was a little upset, and I had to cut it off the forestay, and it's still out there in the Chesapeake Bay somewhere. So.
Thanks for the story. That must have been an exciting day.
It was a big day. It's a little expensive, but it was a big day. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to hear. All right. So we've got 2 questions here. Well, one person just asked if we're going to post this webinar online, and this will be posted. And then someone's asking about freighters, if there's going to be an issue during racing. Ross, do you want to comment to that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And, I remember 34 years ago when we had the North Americans, some guy called up the harbor master for Vancouver and got them to move all the freighters. But back in those days, there was only 4 or 5 freighters. But now, it sort of goes between that 4 or 5, or there could be as many as 18 freighters. So it's really up to the race committee to find a way around that, and in a worst case scenario, and make sure that they can have a good race course and not really be affected by the freighters. So I'd suspect there will be a few of them for sure, and hopefully not too many, which will give us more options. And the one positive aspect to them is you can kind of get a feel for what the current's doing, or where the current's changing first, as they do tend to swing. And so yeah, it's fingers crossed there won't be much of an issue.
Perfect.
You don't have that kind of pull, Ross. You can get them to move. Just make a little call.
0 pull. I have chain cutters.
Oh, I don't know, man. Sounds a little dangerous to me. That captain would be a little upset, huh?
We've got another question coming in here. It says, although maximum freshet mountain snow runoff doesn't usually happen in early June, please discuss the interaction of the Fraser River current versus ebbing tidal current in a westerly wind direction. Ross, I guess that one's for you again.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't really answer it scientifically, but so much of that runoff and the level of the river it does play an effect on the current, and in a couple of ways. One, it's silty freshwater versus sort of a constant temperature of salt water that meet each other, and so one pushes over top of the other, and and depending on how much snow runoff there is, which usually it happens a little bit later, but it could sort of affect things a little bit. And and when I say affect, it's probably more timing than anything else. And but it's it's nice that you can kind of see it, especially on a sunny day. It's a totally different color of water. But it's I'm trying to think when it was. I think it was in when the class had the last North Americans in 2007. It was later in the year, and basically you didn't see any color change in the water at all. It was in August, and the water was kind of sort of a bluish color the whole time. So so it's a fairly short sort of window that you end up with that really, really silty water. I'd say sort of around this time where the North Americans is sort of June-ish to end of July generally.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross. I think Bruce, I think was trying to say something. Bruce, are you unmuted? Try to get him unmuted. I guess he has a plan to remove the freighters around possibly. So if you have any questions about that, maybe reach out to Bruce. Only the presentators can speak on here right now. So unless we have any other questions, and feel free to reach out to us here at North Sales Vancouver or Ross and Eric with any questions that might pop up later tonight after we're done this webinar. As I said, it will be posted online. So if you want to pass this along to anyone, it should be on our YouTube channel. Other than that, thank you very much, Ross and Eric and Alex, for helping out with this. And have a great night, guys, and see you guys in Vancouver in a few months. See you guys.
Thanks, Drew. Nice job.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ross. It
Thanks.
helped a lot.
Thank you.